Hi guys, Garth here with Fried Okla. I initially narrated this video while recording, but my camera was too close to power strips causing horrendous feedback, so bear with my hand movements during this voiceover. Here's my Smith & Wesson Sigma 9mm model SW9VE that I bought 10 years ago when I was broke and needed a pistol for home protection. We're not going to cover how or why, but this pistol was ran over by a car on an asphalt road, leaving it with deep abrasions on the front sight, slide, and frame. I'm going to go over what we're doing to this gun and post times with those items so you can skip to what you need. We're going to remove the abrasions, remove the sights, dress the rear sight, and replace the front sight. Replace the polymer guide rod with the stainless guide rod and Cerakote the pistol. First, we need to disassemble the gun. Yes, the gun is safety cleared before I started this video, but there you go. Field strip your gun as normal. Remove the slide end cap by inserting a brass punch between the firing pin release and the sleeve over the striker, moving the sleeve forward and releasing the end cap. Remove the extractor and striker assembly. Remove the extractor and striker safety plunger. Place all parts from the slide in a separate baggie as to not mix them up with other components. Using a punch, remove the trigger pin. Remove the locking block. The slide stop. The trigger assembly. Punch out the sear pin. Remove the sear housing with ejector. Apply pressure to the barrel stop spring. And shake out the barrel stop. It's hard to see in my shot, but the mag release is held by a spring in a recess inside the mag well. Use a pick to move the spring out of the recess and the mag release will slide out. I wanted to remove the frame plug, but I'm convinced it cannot be removed from the gun. The front sight is glued into a slot and cannot be used again once removed. The front sight will have to be twisted off of the slide, and the rear sight will have to be tapped out from the side. Tape aluminum strips inside of your vise to prevent damaging your frame. Firmly tighten the vise, but not so much that you'll squeeze in on your slide sides. Tape around the front sight to prevent damage while removing. Tap out your rear sight. Using a pair of pliers, twist off your front sight. This rear sight is perfectly fine, but I want it to match my Cerakote. The dots in the sight are flush with the sight itself, so I'm using a number 50 drill bit to follow the dots and make a recess for white paint once I'm done. To remove the abrasions from the slide, I'm using an angle grinder starting with very aggressive Scotch-Brite pads, progressing to fine pads as the damage is removed. Although the left side of the slide is not damaged, I'm going to repeat what I've done on the right side so that the slide stays symmetrical. Notice how shiny it is where we removed the damage from the slide. We'll be addressing that later. To remove the abrasions from the polymer frame, I'm going to start with the number 100 sandpaper, progressively making my way up to 600. The manufacturers of Cerakote instruct you to media blast your polymer parts at a distance with aluminum oxide. Since I don't have a blaster, I'm scrubbing the frame and other polymer parts with steel wool and a steel brush. Follow Cerakote's instructions. This is just an experiment. Continue scrubbing all parts until there is no more sheen on the gun. Spray away excess dust with an air compressor. I found it easier to prepare the magazine butts while still attached to the magazine to provide a handle. Remove the butt plate from the magazine. Cerakote instructs you to submerge steel parts in acetone to degrease, but has no degreasing instruction for polymer parts other than cleaning it. I have submerged my polymer parts in isopropanol as it's not as degrading as acetone, and my steel parts in acetone as instructed. Soak a minimum of 15 minutes. In preparation for blasting my slide, I masked areas I didn't want media to enter by using earplugs and aluminum foil. A friend of mine at a nearby shop blasted my steel parts with glass bead, but this is not recommended by Cerakote. Use number 100 aluminum oxide. After blasting, the slide looks factory with no other work necessary, as is a stainless steel slide, but I'm going forward with the Cerakote for a custom look. Although not instructed to, I didn't see the harm in giving it another soak in the acetone and alcohol for another 15 minutes. Preheat your oven. I used a barbecue thermometer to verify temperatures, and I'm glad I did, as there was a 50-degree discrepancy on the oven. Gas out polymer parts at 160 to 180 degrees and steel parts at 300 degrees for 1 hour. After your parts have cooled, remove them and inspect them for any leached out oil residue. If you find any residue, the parts will need to be rebathed in acetone and alcohol and gassed out again for an hour. I constructed a holder for my frame and polymer parts that I wasn't able to hang from wires by screwing a 1x2 to a piece of scrap baseboard. I inserted the 1x2 into the mag well and masked off the slide rails and serial number plate. I adhered another piece of scrap and used double-sided tape for the small components with the sides requiring coatings exposed. Cerakote requires that you use glass containers, but I have none. I'm using syringes. All syringes have a lubricant on the plunger that I clean off with acetone. In order to lubricate the plungers, I lightly coat them with the respective chemical I will be putting in that syringe. Mix Cerakote per your instructions. This Tungsten H series recommends 18:1. I'm using 54 milliliters of Cerakote, so I'll need 3 milliliters of catalyst. Note that I'm using a plastic container against Cerakote's instructions. This container is designed for chemicals, so I don't see the problem. Again, this is an experiment on a gun I do not care about and do not recommend you do it. Pour your Cerakote into your cup using a number 100 paint strainer. Adjust your flow and spray pattern on a piece of cardboard, and practice on a spare part to ensure you have the consistency and volume you desire. I started with the polymer parts first, as they take longer to cure at lower temperatures, spraying the more difficult areas first, then the larger areas until they are wet but have no runs. Repeat the process with your steel parts. I masked the firing pin hole and made an attempt to remove the tape, but realized I was going to ruin the rest of it, so I left it. Carefully move your parts to the oven. 1 hour at 300 degrees for your steel parts, and 2 hours at 160 to 180 for your polymer parts. I made an attempt to do a pair of Oakleys, but dropped them and broke them. To customize my gun, I'm going to sand the flats of my slide, leaving the side radiuses, the areas between the serrations, and the engraving the only places with Cerakote, and a brushed finish on the flats. I'm going to start with a number 100 grit sandpaper, eventually working my way through the process, getting down to 600. Here you can see the look that I'm trying to achieve versus having left the Cerakote alone. After repeating the process for all 3 sides, I'm going to take a piece of Scotch-Brite going in one direction to give it a brushed grain look. I also decided to mask off the numbers on my barrel to go ahead and give them a quick shot and sand it off so it has that cool look also. Sights for this model are difficult to find. With a little bit of filing and a slight tap, this first-gen Glock sight fit. You don't need a special tool. Use a 3/16 socket. I used green Loctite because I'm out of red. Stuff tape into the socket to protrude the threads for ease of installation. Snug it down tight, but don't kill it. Reinstall your rear sight much as you removed it, but using plastic as a buffer is to not damage it. Using a smaller piece of plastic, try to center it as much as humanly possible. Using white epoxy paint, fill the recesses in the sights that we drilled out earlier. I found this glow-in-the-dark paint on eBay and thought we'd give it a shot, so I applied it with a toothpick. Now this has no comparison to a tritium sight, but with a quick swipe of a tactical flashlight, they did pretty well. Reassemble your gun exactly as you took it apart. Again, use plastic in between your hammer as to not damage any of the work you've just done. I purchased a guide rod for a Glock 23 or 32. Cut off the end of the polymer guide rod with a pair of wire cutters. Transfer the spring to your new steel guide rod and temporarily install the screw and washer. Assemble the gun. Lock back the slide. Remove the screw. Apply Loctite. Again, you should probably use red. Install the screw now that you don't have to fight the spring. wipe away excess with a rag. I shot 100 rounds at the gun range to ensure that the firearm worked and that the sights were accurate, and to see how the Cerakote would hold up. Upon disassembling for cleaning, I immediately noticed a few bare spots inside of the frame where some of the Cerakote has come off. However, everywhere else in the gun looks great. After a thorough cleaning, the only problem I could find was that the contact points inside the slide. Cerakote recommends that you avoid these areas, and who knows, they may have been fine if I had followed the manufacturer's instructions. All in all, the rest of the gun looks great, and I'm glad I did it. Again, this is Garth with Fried Okla, and thanks for watching.